eventually the price of oil has to go way up.
We think we understand something like the oil business. If we're in an oil stock, it's because we think it offers a lot of value at this price. There's nothing we can do in any short period of time that will wean the world off of oil.
If we get another 200 years of economic growth pretty well dispersed over the world, all of the oil, coal, natural gas, and uranium reserves of the world are like nothing. Personally, I think it's extremely stupid to use up the hydrocarbon reserves of the world as fast as we are. And I think it's perfectly crazy to use up something so precious for which you have no alternative that's sure to be available.
Even at these prices, it's hard for me to imagine demand falling off a lot.
We need the oil and the gas and the coal eventually for chemical feedstocks more than we need it for keeping warm and propelling our vehicles.
We look at those businesses over a long time frame, but we are looking at what we expect their earning power to be 3, 5, 10, 15 years down the road compared to what we are paying.
I think one of the main reasons for being restrained in the use of hydrocarbons is that modern agriculture won't work without them.
Obviously, you're dealing with a finite resource. So the one thing I can promise you almost promise you, is that oil will sell for a lot more someday. The one thing I'm quite convinced of, as we talked about this morning, is the fact that the dollar will become less valuable over time, so that the dollar price of most things will go up.
My view is that the single most precious resource of the United States are its hydrocarbon reserves. So I'm all for using up the other fellow's oil and conserving our own. We don't want energy independence. We want to conserve this stuff. Thank God other people have some of this precious stuff they're willing to sell. I have the exact opposite idea on this subject from most people. And of course, I think I'm right.
I think the oil sands are an important asset for mankind. Obviously, there's a huge amount of oil there. They're an important asset for mankind, over the centuries to come. We probably haven't bought the last one. And in the end, we look at the cash, we look at available opportunities, both in investments and businesses, and we make decisions occasionally on buying something, and sometimes we change our mind. And that'll continue that way. It's been going on that way for a lot of years. It's an important industry. It's very good for the consumer. Hundreds of millions of consumers. Oil's a big part of the economy.
Well, you go out over the extremely long term, I think that all the hydrocarbons will be used, including all the coal. In the end, these hydrocarbons are a huge resource for humanity, and I don't think we've got any good substitute. I don't like using them up very fast. People think that all this hydrocarbons are going to be stranded and the whole world's going to change. I think we're going to use every drop of the hydrocarbons sooner or later. We'll use them as chemical feedstock.
When you buy into an oil production company, how it works out is going to depend on the price of oil to a great extent. It is an investment that depends on the price of oil. When you buy oil, you're betting on oil prices over time and over a long time. People that are on the extremes of both sides are a little nuts. I would hate to have all hydrocarbons banned in 3 years. It wouldn't work. I think Chevron's benefited society in all kinds of ways, and I think it continues to do so, and I think we're going to need a lot of hydrocarbons for a long time, and we'll be very glad we've got them. I have no compunction about owning, in the least about owning Chevron. And if we own the entire business, I would not feel uncomfortable about being in that business. We should be very happy that we can produce 11 million barrels a day or something of the sort in the United States, rather than being able to produce none and having to find 11 million barrels a day somewhere else in the world to take care of keeping the American industrial machine working.
I like having big reserves of oil. I would just leave most of the oil we have here, and I'd pay whatever the Arabs charge for their oil, and I'd pay it cheerfully and conserve my own. I think it's going to be very precious stuff over the next 200 years. And nobody else has my view, so it doesn't bother me. I just think they're all wrong.
It wasn't that long ago that, the idea that anybody produced a barrel of oil was somehow something terrible. I mean, just try doing without 11 million barrels a day and see what happens tomorrow. Most people feel that it's nice to have some oil in this country than not have it. We're using a lot of it, and if we were to try and change over in 3 years or 5 years, nobody knows what would happen, but the odds that it would work well are extremely low, it seems to me.
I can hardly think of a more useful industry. I don't have this feeling that it's an evil, crazy place. I wish the rest of the world worked as well as our big oil companies.
We don't know what oil prices will be, but we do very much like the Occidental position they have, and that's why we financed them a few years ago, and it looked like it was a terrible mistake when the oil market just totally collapsed, and then it changed around, and we bought a lot of the common stock. We, in the United States, are lucky to have the ability to produce the kind of oil we've got from shale.
And there's a lot more oil down there if anybody can figure out another magic trick. That's all we need is another magic trick.
The price of oil still is incredibly important in terms of the economics of short-lived oil. I mean, no question about that. We think, frankly, some of the things that are ridiculous, and on both sides, in both extremes. The politicization of positions on something that's enormously important in terms of energy is just it just lends itself to demagogues and fundraisers and advisory organizations and everybody in sight. We will make rational decisions, and we do not think it's un-American to be producing oil. We will not be making any offer for control of Occidental, but we love the shares we have, and we may or may not own more in the future, but we certainly have warrants on a very substantial amount of stock at around $59 a share, and those warrants last a long time, and I'm glad we have them.